Welcome, everyone. This is the start of a new series that John and I have decided to kick off for October. We would like to welcome you to Graboid-tober.
Yes, for the entire month of October, we are going to be reviewing all 6 Tremors movies. And this is a very fun series, one of my favorite monster movies. And I'm pretty sure everyone else is who at least knows about Tremors.
Yeah, according to the Wikipedia page, it's a cult classic.
Oh yeah. And rightfully so. A cult classic, came out in 1990. And so far has spawned, of course, 5 sequels and a short-lived TV series on the Sci-Fi Channel, which I'm pretty sure most of us are still bitter about. And yeah, and that's pretty much it. Well, I guess a little bit of a correction: 4 sequels and a prequel.
Yeah.
Yes. And we're gonna be kicking off with the very first movie, just titled Tremors. And okay, right off the bat, I love this movie.
Yeah, it's so good.
It is very well done, and it's both funny and serious at the same time. It is able to actually toe the line between being just very silly in very aware of what it is, and deciding to just not go ahead, just go full silly.
Yeah, it's found that fine line and just walks it perfectly.
Mm-hmm. And I think that has most of it to do with the writing, the directing, and even the acting. The whole movie, it just feels like a satire of 1950s sci-fi B movies. With giant desert creatures like the giant Gila monster, Them, which is about giant ants, and giant spiders. Those are movies I haven't seen, but you just take one, you see a brief clip of them on either a History Channel or any kind of anything that's dedicated, or AMC, anything that's dedicated to movies, and you just know it's kind of silly.
Yeah.
And Ian, how did you experience Tremors?
Well, originally I didn't know about Tremors until I bought Jurassic World on DVD. I saw the preview for Tremors 5.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't know about it until I saw the preview, so I'm like, okay, there's now 5, I need to watch the other 4 because the 5th one looks interesting. So yeah, I looked around on TV, and sure enough, the first one was on IFC, I believe it was. So I just recorded it there, and they were doing like a marathon thing. So I thought, oh sweet, I'll just get the first 3 knocked out right away.
Awesome. My experience was actually, I think either in the late 90s or very early 2000s. This was before the 3rd movie came out. And that one came out in 2001. So I kind of have a clear time frame. And I actually saw the sequel first. Actually, the last 20 minutes of the sequel, and with my sister, and she told me how the first movie was giant worms, and I took that literally. I thought it was like just a giant slimy worm, kind of like the ones in Dune. But when we finally got to see it also on TV. These worms were just very different than what I pictured in my head. They were almost like dinosaur-like in appearance.
Yeah.
And it was very good. And when the third movie came out, I wanted to get all of them. And so the first movie is also kind of a fun family movie for us. We love this one.
Oh yeah, my grandfather loved it as well.
So the whole premise is that this very small isolated town in the desert in Nevada is
called Perfection.
Yeah, is unknowingly terrorized by these giant worms, and our two stars are simple just handymen who suddenly become the unlikely heroes that save this poor town. And that's pretty much it. That's just the basic premise. And you kind of have the stereotypes. You have the shop owner, you have the farmer, you have the gun-toting maniac. you have the pain in the ass kid
that everyone hates.
And of course you have the unlikely heroes, the handymen. It's almost equivalent to if a janitor would stop a zombie invasion.
Pretty much, yeah.
Val and Earl, played by Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward, respectively.
Oh yeah.
But of course, none of those pale in comparison to the main star of the movie, the Graboid.
Oh yeah. These things are freaky.
They're freaky. They are awesome. There's something that you don't. I don't know. For me, there's something that I would kind of like to experience, but at the same time don't want to, because I don't want to tempt fate.
Yeah.
And I guess we also forgot the scientist. We forgot the hot scientist.
Oh yeah. What's her name?
Rhonda LeBeck.
Yeah.
And so how the plot works is just a very simple build-up of this creature, and honestly, this is what my mind started racing when I was trying to think of what to say for this podcast. And the build-up to the reveal of the worm is just so very well done.
Oh yeah, I mean, first it's very slight. It's very slow.
Mm-hmm. This is how it kind of works. The scientist that's introduced within the very first 5 minutes tells about how there's been some strange readings, and then 2 minutes later, suddenly she unknowingly experiences one of these strange readings. We don't see this creature, but we know that it's under the ground, and it appears to be very big. We see it from its point of view, and it almost grabs her. So we see its perspective, and we hear what it sounds like. And then to actually really sell of how big of a threat this is that we see its first victim without it actually killing him.
Oh yes, old Fred.
No, not old Fred. Edgar
No?
on the power line.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Edgar Deems perched atop an electrical tower, still grasping the tower's crossbeams and his 30-30 Winchester rifle.
Mm-hmm. Stayed up there for 3 or 4 days and died of thirst. Hell of a way to go. Then that brings us to the next victim, which is Old Fred. This is how we know the creature gets its victims. This is how we see this creature first. This is our first instance into the creature killing someone.
Yeah.
Which is built up very nicely, and then when it suddenly goes in for the kill, it just jumps you back.
Yeah, not to mention it also took out Old Fred's entire flock of sheep.
His entire flock of sheep, and we also get a nice little jump scare where his face is just like frozen in terror, buried from the neck down under his Freddy Krueger hat.
Yeah. And after Val and Earl, our two heroes, see the what could be a decapitated head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They are convinced that there is a maniac on the loose.
Yeah, and of course, since this is a lot like a B movie, they tell two construction workers, or actually not part of the perfection population, they think they're just playing a joke on them until they become victims as well.
Yes, one gets eaten and the other gets killed by a rock slide.
Mm-hmm. And which unknowingly traps the heroes and the rest of the people of perfection inside the town,
or at least the valley.
Which is why I like the line that Fred says when they try to leave for the final for Bixby, the big city, for the final time.
Yeah.
And he just remarks, "Is there some higher force at work here?" I mean, are we asking too much of life? And I see that, I'm like, maybe there is a higher force. I mean, we know these creatures aren't that capable of planning yet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And now the next victim are the doctor and his wife. Now this is really great because now we get a first glimpse of the creature, which then later on turns out to be a bait and switch. Is that it looks like these mutated snakes.
Yes, blind, horned, mutated snakes.
And when you look at the cover of Tremors, and this has been on the VHS, on the DVD, and it's pretty iconic, mostly because it kind of harken back to the poster of Jaws.
Yeah.
This is why I like the build-up. Is that, imagine that you don't know what Tremors is. You've never heard of Tremors, and you haven't even seen the sequels. This is the first time you're seeing the very first movie. You're thinking that, oh, those are the creatures from the cover. They're pretty small. Maybe that's because they're babies. And it kind of seems that way when you see the little ones. They retreat, and then the poor woman who thinks that she's safe is suddenly dragged under the car, because now we think, oh, it's the mama.
Or just a whole bunch of them working together, at least.
Yeah.
That's what I get from it.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, the creature reveals itself that those three little snakes are actually its tongues. Tongues of just one very big worm-like creature. And that's why I like the build-up to it, is that it kind of fools the audience if they don't have any context of this series at all.
Yeah, and it's a very good build-up. I think, oh man, I don't know how long the actual film is until we officially see the creature, but I think it's at least a half-hour build-up, if not more.
Yeah, I think so too. I think I even looked up at what time the actual creature pops up. And yeah, I think it was at the 30-minute mark, which is honestly that's kind of like the right that's actually the right moment from it being that's just the right amount of time. It's not revealed too soon, and it's not revealed too long that the audience loses interest.
Yeah.
And all right, and yeah, so when we finally get a reveal of this creature, we can now get a good glimpse at its design. And Ian, you're kind of like, you're the paleo enthusiast, and does it look like does the design of the Graboid kind of almost look like a creature that could have existed in prehistoric times?
Oh, most certainly. Especially during the Carboniferous period, when we had dragonflies the size of hawks and 6-foot-long millipedes.
Oh God, never been.
So it's entirely plausible, but as we'll save that line for the next film.
Okay.
So that goes into more the origin of it and how old it is.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, one of these things could feasibly have evolved at some point.
Mm-hmm. But I guess like the design, with the spikes on its side, the beaks that look like that have serrated blades. Is that almost kind of like? Is that kind of reminiscent? Is that kind of almost like any creatures found in the fossil record?
Oh yes, we have found quite a few worms that have. Well, we found various bones, extremely small bones. Well, I wouldn't call them bones, but they're calcified minerals that have the shape of jaws and like little blades. And I think this is just like a beefed up version, because the current theory is that those jaws actually belong to worms. So we had tiny little jawed worms moving around on this planet.
Wow.
And so I think this could be like a parallel to that.
And this movie came out in 1990. When were those calcified minerals found?
Oh man, I don't know. I read something on them recently. I don't know. Let me look it up.
Okay, because if it turns out this was, because either way, if they were found before or after, is just kind of amazing, both from just as an artistic standpoint, because it shows that the writers and designers are doing research even back in the day. If these were bones that were found before, if they were found after, then I kind of like to going the philosophical route. I kind of like to think that there's kind of where they reached a kind of a connection with the universe or with the past, and now that what they're imagining is actually becoming real, or has been real. If that
there's quite a few fossils of polychaete worms that have been found. Yes, many post-Cambrian polychaetes possessed hard jaws, which are sometimes mineralized with iron oxide. So yes, we have found worms with jaws, and they actually still do live today.
Wow, they still live?
Yep, they're called bobbit worms. You might know of them. They live in the oceans.
Ah. Oh, well, that'll be something for Tremors 7, right before we get to Graboids in space.
Oh god.
We're gonna get there. I definitely know it.
Graboids on Mars.
Graboids on Mars. Yeah. Oh, but
we found life on Mars.
mm-hmm. And we found water on Mars. Hey, you know what? Let's combine both ideas. Oh God.
Don't give Universal any ideas. They're already milking this thing like a freaking cow.
I know. Oh, like, really, like, studios haven't done worse. They've done Jason in space. You know, Jason X.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm. And also, how can studios do any worse than Sharknado 5?
Ah.
And anyway.
Yep.
All right.
Tremors.
Yeah. Back to Tremors. All right. So plot-wise, this is the movie is actually very concrete. The movie starts right at the cliff and introduces our two unlikely heroes. And that's also where it ends. The climax happens at the very same cliff.
Yes.
Even the joke that Val, played by Kevin Bacon, to wake up Earl, the stampede is also what helps defeat the last Graboid.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of writing that I like when it's something that you just kind of dismiss like in the very first minute, and then actually becomes important later on, because then that kind of adds to rewatch value.
Yeah.
Let's see. Val and Earl, or in fact Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward, they have tremendous chemistry. Their comedy, they just riff off each other, and it's very well done, almost like T.J. Miller and Kristen Wiig in the How to Train Your Dragon movies, and even Miller and Andrea Vermeulen, who voiced Rough Nut in the series. They just work well together.
Yeah. I'm just thinking back to one of the jokes that was made toward the beginning after they meet Rhonda.
Oh yes, that. Oh, I remember that. Well, I'm a victim of circumstance. I thought you called it your pecker.
It's crude, but it's hilarious.
Yes. No, yeah, and yeah, that's kind of the chemistry. I mean, they act like they've been partners for a long time, and so they know how to get under each other's skin.
Yeah.
And let's see, Val actually does kind of go through the most transformation, because in the beginning of the movie, he wants a girl, but there's a specific girl in mind, and
yeah, he had the list.
He had the list, and was hoping that Rhonda was gonna fit all those that list. Only she doesn't, at least to his mind, and he's just all disappointed. But throughout the experience, he thinks that, you know what, this is the woman for me.
Yeah.
So he's kind of like the central figure of this movie. Even though he and Earl are kind of the main protagonists.
Yes.
Let's see. Rhonda is a seismologist, so studying vibrations in the ground, and she's the one who has the most book smarts out of everyone in the town.
Yeah. And everybody, during the meeting, like discussing the creatures, everybody looks to her for what they are, where they come from.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking two things. Okay, A, we don't know that much about them. We just discovered. And B, biology isn't her field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true. That's kind of why I like the last time she gets asked something, she just goes, "Why do you keep asking me?" And, okay. I think we've delayed this long enough. The breakout character of the entire series. Burt Gummer.
Yeah. Played by Michael Gross.
Mm-hmm. And not many people know this, but apparently he was an actor on Family Ties. He was on Family Ties, and before being on Tremors, and it's just kind of amazing that most kids of my generation and preceding generations after, they don't know about that. They just know him as the gun guy from these movies. So he's kind of he shed his sitcom skin. No one knows him as the guy on the sitcom. They know him as the guy that fights the giant worms, with
the high-powered rifle.
Yes. Which I'm gonna be honest. When it was him facing off against the monsters in these movies that actually kind of made me interested in gun. But I still don't own one. I don't have a permit for that at all.
Yeah.
But
and Mr. Gummer is actually married in this film.
Yeah, he does have a wife played by Reba McEntire in her film debut, actually.
Yeah, this was her first film.
Mm-hmm.
And she did a pretty good job.
And she's just as knowledgeable about guns as her husband. She doesn't go, "Honey, what's this do?"
Yeah, she knows exactly what does what, and what does the most damage.
Mm-hmm. And
with me, I'm like, this looks cool.
Mm-hmm. So, and it was kind of nice to see how they kind of work together in first when they both killed a Graboid that just burst through their wall, and how when they're making homemade bombs, and they're both cutting the workload in half, and one of them will grab something and tosses it to their partner, who catches it. I mean, yeah, for a 1990s movie, especially with how people and studios want to make movies nowadays, this is kind of ahead of its time.
Indeed, yeah.
And those are the more important characters. Especially, and even how those are kind of the more important characters. Most of the others are kind of like extras or worm food.
Yes, although I have to say, young Ariana Richards did a very good job with her role.
Oh yeah, I can't believe I forgot, and I even remembered her before we got on. Yes, Ariana Richards, who would later on play Lex in Jurassic Park, is the little girl on the pogo stick in this movie. And yeah, she does very well with the limited amount of screen time that she gets. And honestly, with a movie that's about monsters that attack anything that makes a sound, it is a very effective way of turning a very fun toy into an instrument of death.
Yes, and when we might get to this later.
Okay.
But when she gets tackled off of it by Val, and it just stands there.
Yes.
Then it gets jerked underground.
Yeah.
And then it flies out. That's not food.
That's
and that sort of becomes a running gag whenever the Graboids eat something that's not food. They spit it back out.
Really? I only remember. Oh, right. Wait. I only remember the one moment and the moment at the end. But what's a running gag implies that it happens. It happens very often. What was the other thing?
The generator.
Oh, right, the generator. That's right. Now, all right. What do you think we should move? Should we talk some more about the characters, or should we move on?
I guess we can move on. We pretty much tackled all the major characters.
Yeah, and we're not forgetting about Melvin, the pain in the ass kid. We just don't want to talk about him.
No, he's an ass.
Even though we like how he turns into a whimpering scaredy cat.
Oh yeah.
I mean seriously, you have to be that scared to go from the ground to the pole in what, 5 seconds flat?
Yeah. And he didn't even get away unscathed. They still, the tongue still got him a little bit.
Are you? Oh, because of the hole in the pants?
Yeah, he has some holes in his clothing and he's bleeding a little bit.
Oh, okay. And all right, I think before we get to the fun part, well, fun part for me is the visual effects. Let's talk about the music.
Oh yeah, music.
The music actually does give this movie a very unique identity. In fact, I just looked up on IMDb. It was actually done by 2 composers.
Yes, one did not get credit in the actual film though.
And he's the one that was actually did, the full orchestral cinematic score that we hear in the climax. And and the one who does get credit is the one who did the whole the country harmonica kind of music.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's the harmonica music is kind of a good way to kind of set up the background, the setting, and even the characters.
Yeah.
I mean, it's upbeat, it's fast paced, and I guess it's it's rowdy, it's wild and crazy, it's wild west.
Pretty much, yeah.
Before turning into like this big cinematic fight for survival. And honestly, I kind of wish they didn't release the soundtrack for that, because I love the climax, the song that plays at the climax.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it according to Wikipedia, it was released.
It was.
The soundtrack for Tremors was composed by Ernest Troost and was released in 2000.
Oh, just
The album contained 9 tracks from the film, as well as 4 additional tracks, also composed by Truth from Blood Rush. For promotional purposes, the album was released as a limited edition CD.
Ah, of course. 10 years... Well, 10 years after the movie is released, and it's only a limited edition.
Yeah.
Thank God for the internet.
Yep. Thank you, internet. I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube.
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure too. All right. Let's see. Is there anything? Let's see. I guess. Should we move on to special effects, or is there anything else that you want to talk about?
No, let's go to effects.
Okay. Now, because this was released in 1990, so before, or in other words, before Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
It uses a lot of the old-time practical effects, which again I love so much. It uses animatronics, it uses puppetry, it uses miniatures, and even forced perspective. And
yeah.
And forced perspective is pretty much making objects appear smaller or larger than they are, than they really are. You see it in Lord of the Rings, in Elf. It's a very low budget, a very easy effect to do. But if you don't know how to do it, it's gonna be obvious that it's an effect. I guess this is kind of why I lean more towards the first movies, because they are using animatronics and puppetry, so there is a sense of realism to it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Even the Graboid guts when it explodes they're not real Graboids, thank God. It's pumpkin guts.
Is that what it is?
It's pumpkin guts.
Well, it works.
It does. And if you've carved out pumpkins before, you know how bad they are.
Yeah.
God, even when they're fresh, they smell bad. So just the fact that there was, but what I like from the effects is that, again, it's the dedication and all the hard work that the team puts into to try to get these bastards into the ground.
Oh yeah. Even with the I read this somewhere, I forget where it was, but when we see the mound of dirt moving along, that was actually a car airbag being dragged along by a truck.
Yeah, and what they dug a path in the dirt, and then they covered the top of it with this kind of this stretchy sheet I don't know what material it's made from, but it's a good way to actually it's a good way to actually mimic something that's very solid, and then it just like rebounds back. I think it might be the same material that you see in the original Ghostbusters when just before Dana gets possessed. You see something coming through the door.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I honestly like that. And the
apologies, I thought I muted that.
It's okay. And a lot of the when you see the graboids moving through moving through the dirt, like when especially the scene when Val, Earl, and Rhonda go up on the rock, when they re-meet old Stumpy.
Stumpy.
The Graboid with the missing tongue. When they're kind of looking over it, we get this high angle shot of Stumpy doing his shark moment. Those are miniatures.
Oh.
Those are miniatures, and the Graboid that actually comes out to grab the post, when Val checks to see if it's still there, that's a hand puppet.
It works.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, this movie it's low budget, but it just works. I mean, I'm so glad that it became a cult classic, which is, if you read on the IMDb page, you know that Kevin Bacon actually thought this was the lowest point of his career.
Ow!
Let's see. Well, according to the IMDb page, let me bring it up. Prior to the film's release, Bacon felt that the film was a career low. I broke down and fell to the sidewalk, screaming to my pregnant wife, "I can't believe I'm doing a movie about underground worms."
When he says it like that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, it's almost like, how about you do a movie about mutated poodles? Let's see. Yeah, I can understand where he's coming from. A movie about underground worms, mutated poodles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Before it was popular, it could sound like it's a career low. So yeah. And there's a lot of old time special effects that I do really like to see, and I really like seeing, and I like guessing how it was done, either by doing research or just looking at it. And that's kind of what makes what makes the movies very fun, and that's kind of what makes it harken back to the old B movies of the 1950s.
Yeah. Critical response for Tremors. Tremors was well received and hailed by critics for its diverse cast and humor. The film holds a fresh rating of 85% at the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, based on 33 reviews and an average score of 7 out of 10, with the consensus an affectionate throwback to the 1950s creature features. Tremors invigorates its genre tropes with a finely balanced combination of horror and humor.
And I agree. Even the dialogue when they're trying to figure out where these creatures came from, and they list all four possibilities that were in the 1950s movies. Like they're mutated, they were made by the government, they've always been there, or they're from space.
Yes, and in the film, they purposefully didn't try to explain where they came from.
And I guess that's another reason why I like that, is because there's a lot more. It's the mystery that's kind of the mystery rather than the knowledge that is that we like in our movies. Sure, we would like some things explained, but there's a greater intrigue in mystery.
Oh yeah.
All right. Let's see. What do you think we should move on to next, if there's anything?
I can't think of anything really.
All right. Well, I think we can probably skip the legacy of Tremors, because I think with 5 sequels and a TV series, its legacy is done very well.
Oh yeah. That's self-explanatory.
Yes.
It has multiple sequels, short-lived TV series, and it's a cult classic.
Mm-hmm.
There, that's the legacy.
That's the legacy. But I guess, do you think Tremors could be a movie that would be studied in film schools?
Maybe.
I can.
Since it's basically an all-encompassing film about the 1950s creature monster film, this would basically sum up that entire decade of film.
Mm-hmm. I kind of think so too. I think Tremors is actually a good intro movie into for young film enthusiasts, into just the tropes, the plot of everything that makes up the 1950s sci-fi movies.
Oh yeah.
In a sort, but kind of brings it into sort of in a modern context, and sometimes it's a deconstruction that doesn't really kill the genre. It's like the review that you read off said, it kind of revitalizes it.
Yeah.
All right. I guess with that done, let's give it a rating. For me, the movie is very well acted. Some old-time special effects and a nice balance of humor and horror. I give Tremors 9 out of 10 stars.
I have to say the same. Yeah. It's a very well done film. Leaves several questions to be answered, but they're not overbearing.
Mm-hmm. It is very quotable. It has a lot of interesting characters, and has very great rewatch value.
Oh yeah.
So if you find a copy of Tremors, buy it, stream it. I highly recommend that you watch it. It is worth a viewing.
Mm-hmm. If you actually get it at Walmart, you can. I got my the first 4 films all together for about $7.
Hmm.
So check out Walmart if you're looking for it.
All right. And with that, we end our first review for Graboid-tober. Join us next time when we review Tremors 2: Aftershocks. This time, the worms have turned.